Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. We are filled with legal news this week, so let's go through all the cases one at a time. No real update yet in the January 6th case that will be set for oral argument just about a month from now, a little over a month from now. And I think we should be clear that there is still time if the Supreme Court rules somewhat expeditiously, but even if they don't rule until the end of their term, which would be the end of June, that there's a very good chance that that case will at least begin before the election. And that's key because the country, although they can't see or hear directly, will get reports daily on what that case is about. Trump will be forced to stay in court, and hopefully the public will get reminded again and again and again about the awful events of January 21. So although that case is delayed, there remains hope. Now, delay is the operative word because that seems to be what is going on in the other three cases. Let's start in New York. Through no fault of his own, Alvin Bragg, who is the district attorney, all ready to go in just about 10 or 11 days, the 25th, and getting ready for trial. But what happens? The Southern District of New York, those are the federal prosecutors in New York, who declined to bring a case against Donald Trump, have just dumped tens of thousands of documents into the laps of the prosecutor and, in turn, the defense. Why would they do this? They have had requests for these documents for months and months and months, and they choose a couple weeks before the trial to dump this. This almost seems like an effort to wreck Alvin Bragg's trial. It almost seems as if they were embarrassed they didn't bring the case and therefore don't want him to be successful. It smacks of the worst kind of petty partisanship, and it also speaks once more to the absolute incompetence, lack of leadership, lack of aggressiveness of the boss, who is Merrick Garland. Yes, the U.S. attorneys ultimately report to the Attorney General, and you have to put the responsibility with him once again. How could they imagine they would get away with this if it were under an Attorney General who ran a tight ship, who gave the word out, we're going to proceed as swiftly as possible for these prosecutions, the country has a right to know? Obviously, that message has not come down to the Southern District of New York, and so they are gumming up the works. On the positive side, that trial may be delayed 30 days or so, but it is going to go. And that case is relatively short. They'll pick a jury within a week or two, and a trial will take maybe a month. So we are very likely to get that trial, again, delayed, but we're going to get it, and I think we will get to a verdict. And I think that will be the first conviction of a former president. The case is very strong. Remember, this is about falsification of documents in support of other crimes, tax evasion, finance violations. And in this case, they really do have Trump dead to rights. They have evidence that he tried to dress up the hush money payments as legal services paid to Michael Cohen. They have plenty of evidence, and the facts and the law are pretty strong in this one. So I do think that we're going to wind up with at least one conviction this summer. Next case, Mar-a-Lago. This is where, pardon the expression, cases go to die in Florida. It's not just elderly residents, but the case, because, of course, you have Eileen Cannon, who is there to gum up the works, who is in Trump's pocket, who has delayed and delayed and delayed. And once more, what does she do? She holds an entire day's worth of hearing on frivolous motions and then comes back with a ruling that after all of this, she says, well, we don't really have all the facts. Why doesn't she have the facts? It's too hard to decide. What we're going to do is hold Trump's argument, which is that the case is too vague, until we go to trial. so that the defense can bring it up at trial or when the case goes to the jury. Huh? At that point, of course, the case would be ruined. They couldn't impanel a new jury because that would be double jeopardy. So essentially, she has used up a day of frivolous hearings and all the briefings that have come before it in order to say, no, we're really going to take this up much later, and there's a good chance I'm going to sink your case, Mr. Prosecutor, when we get to trial. If we get to trial. Whenever we get to trial. This really is bad faith judging. And unfortunately, this is the kind of order that is probably not appealable in any real sense. She didn't really make a ruling. She just wasted a lot of time. And when they get to trial, it'll be too late to raise appeals. Meanwhile, there are still a set of motions, a set of documents out there that are at issue. This would be the request from the prosecutor, Jack Smith, to reconsider her order that would allow witness names and other classified materials to go to the defendant, Donald Trump. Well, she is sitting on that because I think she's trapped. If she doesn't reverse herself, in other words, if she doesn't say, oh, never mind, we won't give this sensitive material to the defense, she looks like a fool. If she doesn't, that will be an opportunity for Jack Smith to take the case up on an emergency appeal and hopefully move to recuse her. But realistically, where are we with that case? We are probably months and months away from getting underway. Should Jack Smith have moved to recuse her earlier? Well, it sure looks like it. Would he have had a basis for it? Perhaps. But he sure wouldn't have lost anything. He's sure not going to get to trial this way, not with this judge. So that is also sitting out there. Last case, Georgia. This is the massive Rico case brought against Trump and more than a dozen other defendants, specifically looking at Trump's actions in Georgia. That would be to solicit Raffensperger to come up with just enough votes so that that would swing the case. That was his effort to, in essence, intimidate people, intimidate the officials there working on the election, and essentially steal the election. If he couldn't steal the election that way, it was to come up with phony electors and win that way. It's that case that we're talking about. Well, we have been sidetracked for weeks now because we've been hearing all about Fani Willis's love life. That's right. We've been treated to weeks and weeks of testimony and controversy that she has had an affair with someone who she hired to work for the DA's office, a special counsel. And that was raised by the defendants as grounds for recusal. What's the conflict? What's the problem? Well, you can only remove a prosecutor for a conflict of interest. Having an affair is not a conflict of interest. It would be only a financial conflict that would disqualify her. But nevertheless, we spent many, many days talking about her sex life, frankly, and how they arranged their affairs, literally as well as figuratively. Well, the judge issued an order today on Friday that was baffling. On one hand, he said, I couldn't find any conflict of interest. The facts don't exist for that. However, there could be an appearance of a conflict of interest. Well, if there's not an actual conflict of interest, what gives rise to this? Well, there isn't any evidence that she or Mr. Wade, who is the special counsel, financially benefited from this. So what's the appearance? Well, he raises a whole set of other issues, which is that she and he may not have been honest. Where he comes up with this, we don't know, about when the relationship started. Wait a second. When the relationship started is irrelevant to any consideration of conflict. So why is he even discussing that? And then he takes a further pot shot at her and says she really probably wasn't truthful about the way that they repaid one another, although I can't prove it. And after all of this, what's the solution? Well, she can either leave the case or Wade can leave the case. But if there's a conflict of interest or an appearance of a conflict of interest, how does removing Wade solve that? It really is just baffling. This is a political decision to smear her, to dirty her up, so the Republicans who put him there, he's a Republican judge, will be pleased, so it will gum up the works. But he doesn't force her off the case, which would be a clear error and then reversible. So once more, we have a case that is gummed up with the help of a judge, a Republican judge, and the defendants. So what happens now? Well, Fani Willis could very well take umbrage at this nonsense that the judge turned out and said, there's no basis for telling me to leave the case or to tell Wade to leave the case. So I'm appealing this. This is a bunch of made up facts and a bunch of made up law. And I want to stay on the case. I was put there by the good people of Georgia, and I can run the case the way I want. So she could appeal, but that would take up more time. Yes, it would. It would also potentially give the defendants grounds for appeal later on if she remained on the case. And to make matters worse, the judge he literally invited the ethics board, the state Senate Oversight Committee to investigate her. Because what? Because there really isn't a conflict of interest, but there might have been an appearance of conflict because she didn't use good judgment. So whichever way you look at this case is gotten much more gnarly than it was before. And remember, even if all of this were wiped away, even if they were ready to go to trial in a month, in a week, the case that has been filed is so complicated, has so many defendants, has so many different charges, that it will take weeks, if not months, to select a jury. And then beyond that, to try the case could well be over a year. That's the way these other RICO cases that she has brought have worked out. So let me put this bluntly. If your concern is keeping Donald Trump out of the White House and preserving democracy, this case is useless. Now, do we want Trump eventually to be brought to justice if he isn't put back in the White House and doesn't wreck our judicial system? Of course. Over time, yes, in a year or two or whenever, he should face trial, he will face trial, and you want to do that with the best possible case, which probably means, despite being smeared, Fani Willis probably should step down for the good of the case. Not fair, not right, and really evidence of a still white racist power system that went after a African-American woman DA. Life is not fair. She has not been treated fairly. But once more, the case is stalled, and even if it began, it's not going to be the solution. So, you're sitting back, exasperated, tearing your hair out. Justice delayed is justice denied. Yes, it is. And we may not have the silver bullet in a courtroom, even in 4 different courtrooms, to get rid of Donald Trump and to make sure he doesn't retain or recapture, rather, the White House and doesn't wreck our democracy. What that means is you, the voters, are going to have to do that work. You, the voters, are going to have to make sure he doesn't get anywhere near the White House. And on that front, there's actually some pretty good news. First of all, President Biden gave a boffo State of the Union address, defying the very, very low expectations that were set for him. He was completely on the ball. He was funny. He was tough. In fact, he was so tough, the Republicans were complaining he was being too political. Yes, these are the people who back Donald Trump, who gave an award to Rush Limbaugh and a State of the Union address. These people are complaining that Joe Biden was too political. Imagine that. At any rate, a very good State of the Union. And then what had seemed to be a problem, namely the special counsel report, Robert Hur, making some gratuitous comments about Joe Biden's memory, really kind of came back to bite the Republicans in the behind, because he came to testify and 2 or 3 interesting things happened. First of all, it became very evident that this guy had, at the very least, been terribly dishonest in the report. In the transcript, which the Democrats cleverly released, it shows that he even complimented the president, that this was, he said, a man with a photographic memory. That didn't make it into his report, did it? So he essentially came off looking like a pretty dishonest shill. And that crack about the president not remembering the death of his son, in fact, he popped up immediately, May 30th, he said. And then some other people in the room offered the date. That was not a failure to remember the date of his son's death. That is just gratuitous. So that was a bad thing for the Republicans and kind of gave some credence to the fact that, yes, the president is on the ball. Photographic memory, Joe Biden. But secondly, the Democrats did something smart, and that is they used the time to show montages of Donald Trump, who is mentally degenerating before our eyes. It's not just that he forgets a date. He forgets who is president. He gets into word cul-de-sacs where he seems to be lost. He makes up words. He slurs words. There was something seriously wrong with him. And Democrats made that point effectively, and they showed montages so that people, if they were watching or if they saw coverage, might gain that information and that awareness. Which, of course, raises the issue. Why hasn't the press been covering this? Why haven't these episodes been played over and over again on the evening news, just the way they make an issue of Biden's age on the evening news, night after night? Could be that they're not telling it straight. Could be that they want to artificially level the playing field. Could be that they want a competitive race. Could even be that they prefer to have Donald Trump as president because that would include and improve their ratings. Go figure. So at any rate, the press looks bad, and once again, Biden looks good. And I think the third thing to come out of the Robert Hur exercise is that once more, you just got the general sense that the Republicans are a bunch of clowns. They constantly do themselves in. They have no self-awareness, so they don't know when something's going to blow up in their faces. The Democrats are pretty savvy. They're pretty media savvy at this point. You have people who were able to conduct questioning, like Ted Lieu, like Jerry Nadler, who really painted, I think, an accurate portrait of Robert Hur as a political hack. And they were able to put together these, if you will, blooper rolls of Donald Trump. So that was some good news. The other good news, the economy continues to be strong. Inflation seems to be, if not back to exactly 2%, at least under control. The economy keeps adding jobs. And Biden is now back out on the campaign trail. And wouldn't you know, he seems pretty vibrant. He seems pretty energetic. Doesn't seem old. So I think if you had to sum up this last week, as distressing as things were on the legal front, where we have really seen how easy it is for someone who is rich, powerful, and by the way, rich doesn't mean necessarily a millionaire. Rich just means you can get a bank loan and pay high-priced lawyers or promise to pay high-priced lawyers, that you can gum up the works, that the courts are not going to save us from Donald Trump. And on the other hand, I would say the political prospects of a re-election for Joe Biden are pretty good. I know that's not what you get from the mainstream media, but these are the same people who don't tell you that Donald Trump is melting down before our eyes. So remember, do the work of being a good citizen and saving democracy. Vote. Make sure your friends and family vote. Make sure people you know are registered. Give to groups that support democracy, that support preservation of the rule of law. And most of all, use whatever platform you have to keep your friends informed, to point them to articles which do fairly portray the president's accomplishments and do fairly present Donald Trump, who is a degenerating and degenerate personality. So if you like this program and you like our other programs, tell your friends. They can click right there. They can follow and subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.